Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, a travel podcast. My name is Nathaniel Mellor, and with me is...
Darcy Melton. Hi, Nathaniel.
Hi. One day we should kind of figure out how to actually do an introduction.
Yeah, it's free. It's loose.
It's very loose. We were actually going to get music for this one, but we still haven't sort of even looked for music. But we still have this idea that we should get music.
Are you saying that we're not going to sing our own jingle, Nathaniel? I come from jingle singing blood.
Yeah,
what would you
she's
call
got
that?
the jingle singing blood, you guys. She's from Savannah, the home of Jingle Bells, I believe. What are we talking about in this episode?
Not that. This is the kitchen sink episode. We're just going to kind of throw in here all the things that we haven't said yet because they didn't fit anywhere else, and reiterate some things that we think are important and give some updates.
Yeah. Like sort of, I think we also been here for in Rome just to clarify. We've been in Rome for about a month now, and it's sort of some tiny things have changed, some not so tiny things have changed. Most of our time in previous years was spent during COVID, actually. So now that that's sort of potentially done, depending, things have very much opened up. So we kind of wanted to give an update for anyone who might be planning a trip soon, or anywhere. I mean, just I guess anytime in the future, just in general, if you're planning a trip and sort of in non-COVID years, this is, I guess, what now you have to look forward to. But before we get started, I wanted to mention that we actually have a website now, onlyabag.com. I feel like I'm doing a radio voice at onlyabag.com. You'll find out your travel tips and tricks. But no, we have a little, basically it's, we've enjoyed doing the podcast. It's very sporadic, still. But so are we, unfortunately.
But we're going to get better. Don't worry. Please stick with us.
As soon as we get a permanent apartment, we do a lot of house sitting and stuff. So there's a lot of bouncing around involved. It's hard.
We are traveling. Hence the travel podcast. But we're going to settle down. We're going to get more consistent. We have the website, and it's got a lot of really good information on it. And Nathaniel just started our Instagram. Yeah,
it's got a total of 3 followers, me, Darcy, and one other stranger. So I'm very excited. If you'd like to also be one of our 3 followers, you can grow it to 4 or more. I believe it's only _a_bag. And I'll have links for this in the description, of course. But the website will basically have everything that the podcast does, but there's more space there to kind of break it down, give you links, give you a little bit more information. And I realized sometimes these podcasts go for an hour, and there's still things we want to say, but then it's I don't want to somebody listen to an hour and a half of us talking.
It's also great to reference back to things. I mean, I feel like sometimes we're doing the thing where we send someone a 15-minute voice memo, instead of sending a text. So the website is a text version of our important information, essentially, that's easier to refer back to maybe than listening to an hour of us talking about gelato or something.
Yeah, and trying to find where did they say this thing was, or what were they talking about? So if you want to read any of these, I will start putting links to the links. Technically, I think will be also going to be a couple days, even weeks behind the actual podcast. I think we're going to be trying to do podcasts first and then sort of articles to follow. Some cases it might be the other way around. I realize that this is sort of evergreen content, so to speak. So it's always going to be live.
Look at you with your fancy phrases.
I know. I spent so long trying to figure out how to set up a website the other day, which it's not that I'm dumb at setting up websites. I've set up 9, but this is the first one I haven't used a website builder. So it's just been nonstop Googling. So I realized if this podcast is going to just sort of be on the internet forever, you might hear this in 2 or 3 years. And at that point, I hope that there will be some links in the description. So that was how we wanted to introduce this. We thought that was a good way to introduce this podcast. But yes, there's a website now, and there's an Instagram account now.
What is the website called, Nathaniel?
Onlyabag.com.
And the Instagram is, just to reiterate, only_a_bag.
Yes. Cool. Yeah. And that'll just mostly also kind of be photos and stuff. I don't. Darcy does a lot more Instagramming than I do, so I'm learning at it. I'm in charge of the Only a Bag Instagram, so I'm learning at how to become an Instagrammer. So what are we talking about first besides that incredibly important first detail?
That incredibly important, long-winded detail. I think we should talk about what to do in an emergency when you're in Rome or in Italy or away from home traveling in Europe. but specifically here in Rome.
Yeah, we saw actually, I'm pretending that like we don't both know this happened, but they always do that in podcasts. Like, actually, the other day we saw this thing, and you're like, you guys were together the other day. We both saw it. Anyway, I guess I'm speaking to you, podcast listener. That the other day we saw somebody who was having a bit of a medical emergency. Couldn't figure out, like, I mean, she spoke English. We all spoke English, but it's not something you really want to ask, like, apart from, are you okay? And how can we help? You know, you don't want to kind of get really specific in case it's something that somebody doesn't like want to share.
Yeah.
So no, but she was in pain and she was sitting on a bench and she was like, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry to stop you. I heard you guys speaking English, and you're the only people who have walked by in like 5 minutes who speak English." And I think her boyfriend was trying to call like a taxi. They were having a strike. She was in pain. It was a Sunday, so like things were closed. It was a whole thing, and essentially we ended up realizing that if everybody sort of knew or if they knew specifically the emergency numbers, it would be a little bit more helpful. And I think they did call someone and they just said they didn't speak English and hung up. And I will go ahead and mention that most of these lines should, especially in Rome, speak some English, or at least ask you to stay on the line while they get somebody who speaks better English, because it's not uncommon in Rome for tourists to be here and need obviously to call helplines for things just like dehydration, or for something like, oh, we're in a crowded area and I lost my kid, like let me call the cops and see if they can send somebody out here, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So those numbers to keep in mind. The first one is
112. That's the general European version of 911. Essentially, that is the emergency number to call anywhere in Europe. It will work, like I said, everywhere in Europe. In Italy, there's also 113, which is the Italian equivalent of 911. So that one will not work in other countries, but 112 and 113 will both work here in Italy.
And of course, the next one is 115. That is who you call basically in case of a fire. But also we wanted to put this, a fire also maybe not super likely, depending on what you're going to be doing, but it's also the number you call when you're out hiking or trekking or something like that, and one of your party goes missing or takes the wrong turn and you can't find them. 115, they also organize basically the searches and try to track down missing hikers and missing people. So if you are planning on day trips or even a couple overnight trips, walking around, exploring hiking trails, things like that, 115 is a great number to keep in mind, to write down somewhere and to use in case of emergency. The next one is
118. That's for a medical emergency, to call directly, like an ambulance, essentially. It's a great number to know, but my first call would be to 112 or 113 because that's the catch-all for any emergency.
Especially, I think, on off chance you think you have a medical emergency and somebody else doesn't. I'm not sure when that would happen, but it's always good to use the general number, not maybe a specific one sometimes. But the medical one, I do believe, and I'll put this down in the description, I believe in the summers there is it's the same number, 118, but for things like anything heat related, like dehydration or heat stroke or something like that, they have a kind of a special sort of, not task force, but a reaction unit kind of thing where, there are people, unfortunately, who do not realize how hot and boiling the city can get, and they need somebody to be sent out just to sort of, hydrate them, bring them to the hospital sometimes and get an IV. So those are all very useful numbers, 112, 113, 115, and 118. And I'll put them all down in the description. And then we're going to have a very short, tiny little ad break. Short for you guys, not short for us. I'm just going to pause it and then push play again. And then somewhere in there, I'll cut in the ad. And again, I keep saying this every episode. I apologize for the audio quality ad. I don't know if you guys care that much, to be honest. I don't know if you just skip through it. But I had to record it with a different microphone that wasn't as good, and I can't seem to re-record it. So enjoy me talking about Anchor.
Welcome back from hearing Nathaniel's voice to hearing my voice. I think we should talk about some helpful hints.
Yeah, just small things. Yeah.
Yeah, the big one is bringing hand sanitizer or soap with you, just because it's a city and you're gonna be touching things that are gross.
Well, it's especially we noticed like public transportation. It's sort of I mean it's kind of a classic, right? Like, but as soon as you touch like one thing, like one railing, it's just days ruined. You can't put your hand in your mouth or
Well,
your eyes.
especially since COVID. I mean, I think
yeah.
I walk around just kind of like, okay, I can't put my right hand on anything else.
Yeah, that's a huge one though. Especially, I mean, people also, if you like, we mentioned these food markets and stuff like that. It's really common that people offer you like samples. I mean, even if you get a gelato, you can sample anything. So it's sort of just this like, there's constantly things that are entering your mouth.
Yeah, you're just putting your hands inadvertently in your mouth and in your eyes and in your nose. And obviously, if you have kids, they're doing that all the time, and you know that. So just hand sanitizer or soap. Nathaniel, you're a big fan of bringing soap.
Okay, so it's this idea I have. I haven't seen anybody else do it yet. So it's not like new to me or anything like that. It's just I'm hoping it catches on. But because there are fountains everywhere in Rome, like these little like water fountain, sort of they're cast iron. We've talked about them before. They look like a little pedestal. They have a little spout coming out. Anyway, they're fountains. Is the point. I could just put a photo in the description, I realized.
People know what fountains look like.
Yeah, it's a fountain. You've seen fountains. And so it's water that comes from the reservoir. It runs through there, and then it gets used, I believe, by farmers. But the idea is that Rome has fountains everywhere. You can always use them to drink from. And I was thinking, with like a biodegradable soap, like Dr. Bronner type thing, like one of those plant-based soaps, not something crazy. And well, I mean, I say that, but like people will be dumping random stuff into these drains. Mm-hmm. So it's not like unheard of to be dumping just regular soap.
Yeah, but best practices being
exactly.
Nice,
Try something sustainable. And no, I thought like if you bring around like the little 3-ounce bottle of some sort of soap.
Like Dr. Bronner's Castile? What is it?
Castile soap, something like that.
Soap? That's that's Nathaniel's favorite.
This isn't like an affiliate link, by the way.
It's not at all. We both just like them, and it's a good option. They have tiny little travel size.
Exactly. It fits easily. It smells delicious. I mean, come on. But I like the idea because we constantly are touching things, and then I always kind of rinse my hands in the fountains anyway, just to kind of like,
pretend like they clean?
Exactly. Yeah. This washed off all the germs. And hand sanitizer is okay. And a lot of places have hand sanitizer, but I'm used to the Pure something. What is that? America's one.
I think both of those are
okay.
Things.
And it's sort of like it's like alcohol gel that evaporates, and it doesn't feel like it leaves a residue. And a lot of the ones here leave this residue all over your hands, and it's not really pleasant. So I'm like, oh, if I brought soap with me, I could just be washing my hands wherever I go. Plus, sometimes the bathrooms at places don't have soap anyway. This is just a no-brainer idea.
Good point. That's a good point. We should bring soap around.
This is me finally convincing Darcy.
We should bring soap around.
Not that we don't bring soap because Darcy doesn't believe me. It's more of just the fact that we don't have soap that small, and it's like an effort to go get soap that small, and then we're like, oh, we should really do that someday. And the hand sanitizer is the same thing.
But on the topic of bathrooms, I feel like I've talked about this so much. Sorry, everyone, if you're offended by me talking about bathrooms all the time. But on the topic of bringing little soaps around, bring little packs of tissues if you need toilet paper. I have said this before, but I've been here. We've been here for a few weeks now, and sometimes there's no toilet paper. So
very often there's no toilet paper.
Almost all the time.
It's really, some of these bathrooms are just sort of filthy. Even like in bars, not bars like drinking bars, but like cafe bar type places. They're just, everything is just, I think there's a whole, we've talked about that before, I think earlier, there has to be some sort of rule that if you serve drinks, you must have a bathroom or something, because a lot of times, and I think I must have mentioned, I'm having deja vu, but it's like those little converted newspaper huts that used to be everywhere that would just sell newspapers. Not a lot of them, some of them have been converted to bars with outdoor tables, but at some part of this converted thing will have a bathroom, and it's usually like ridiculously small.
It is small for you. It is about the right size for Italians and Darcy's.
Yes, so it is a middling size, so they're not all clean is the point. Yeah. What's the other? What is our other?
Yeah, you wanted to mention shoes, footwear.
Well, okay, so I had this idea to do a packing list episode for Rome, and it kind of felt like I couldn't. I was never draft episodes, and I couldn't draft. Like I was like, oh, I should draft this one. I should figure out what it would look like. And part of it was it just felt like I'm telling you what to bring, and you're like, I'm an adult. I could pack my own stuff. So anyway, it was I just couldn't figure out a way. It's like, here's what we bring, and then we realized like, well, we live out of one bag each. You might be coming from a house that has like more options, so you can bring whatever you like. But all of this is to say shoes, footwear is incredibly important. And I know I talked to us about this before. We talked about getting around Rome and walking being such a big thing. And I say it's incredibly important because we see people who I guess don't seem to realize how much they will be walking because it's like, I mean, they basically have, it's sort of more designer, not designer sneakers in the sense like nice sneakers, but it's like clearly for look than for comfort. We see so many people walking around Doc Martens, which are comfortable.
Oh, I love Doc Martens, but it's 100 degrees outside. It is not the time for Doc Martens.
It's insane.
Unless they're sandals.
Yeah, well, and then there's a lot of sandals, but a lot of them are like those kind of like super skimpy, like not that they have to be like rugged sandals, but like it's not uncommon to have your foot caught in something or trip on something, and I mean, almost every day we found like a pair of flip-flops or sandals somewhere that it clearly something broke, and they just left them there because they're like, well, I'm not going to bring them with me. So this is all to say, be super conscientious about the footwear you bring, but the two I wanted to mention specifically is, one is like if you have a non-slip type of shoe, not like kitchen restaurant non-slip, but like a pair of shoes that you're like, these are really good soles. I never slip in them, even when it's wet, when it's this, when it's that. I'm like, they're like, that kind of thing. Because Rome has a lot of very smooth stone everywhere. And Darcy once slipped, actually. And
Darcy slips all the time.
One at the time you landed, and then I was so confused
that Nathaniel abandoned me.
I didn't realize she'd fallen, and then I turned back, and she's sitting on the ground. And I was like, oh, what is she sitting on the ground for?
A nun had to come help me.
Yeah,
because Nathaniel had abandoned me.
Oh, she clearly has let that sort of anger go. But no, it's a lot of, it almost sounds silly, but a lot of the sidewalks are sloped. A lot of especially in the older part of town, they're made out of just stone. So over time, they've naturally worn down to they're very smooth. And if you're not paying attention and you sort of just step with all your weight while you're doing something else, you easily can hit the ground hard. Or
by the end of the day, I mean, you can tell when people have been walking. I can tell when I've been walking. Once I'm tired and I'm not walking so consciously anymore, my full weight is coming down. And it's so easy to just, lose your footing.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing. It's like that sort of tired end of the day thing where you're not really paying attention. And if it's not concrete or like asphalt around you and it's something with a decent grip, it's very easy to slip and fall. And on that note, the other kind of shoe I like to tell people to bring are water shoes, like some type of water shoe. I don't mean, again, like just to clarify, I don't mean like you're going to go into rivers. You're definitely not going to the Tiber. But there's all, like I mentioned, all those fountains around, and a lot of people you'll notice like kind of basically rinsing off their feet in the fountains or like just splashing their heads and stuff like that. But if you have like Tivas or Chacos or just flip-flops or I mean, I know there's some more like hardcore sneakers that can get like just totally wet without having an issue. But something like that I always find really nice myself personally, because if you're just having a day, it's 100 degrees, you're really hot, and you find a fountain, the water out of them is always really, really cold. So it's a really nice way to just kind of feel refreshed. And especially if your feet start just swelling up because it's hot and you're walking all day, it really feels nice just to kind of like just stick your feet in the fountains for a minute. And I want to be clear, it's the fountains that the cast iron ones have explained. Like, I feel the need to explain this because I keep seeing articles about how people put their feet in like the Trevi Fountain or the fountain that's just in front of the Spanish Steps.
A lot of tourists this summer have decided to take a dip in famous fountains that you shouldn't be in.
And maybe that's actually, we don't even have that written down, but we should talk about that just really quickly. Actually, on the topic of fountains, very, very quickly, the rule is all fountains are drinkable, and then there are exceptions, and the exceptions are ones like the Trevi Fountain. There are 3 or 4 others. I think in the Piazza Navona, there's a fountain that's not drinkable, and I think the Piazza Del Popolo, I think those are drinkable. I don't think they're not.
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
Actually, Piazza Del Popolo.
Well, let's just say they're not drinkable. And that was an incredibly long pause, and we're going to probably leave it in there because it might add some atmosphere.
Actually, I'm going to look that up, and maybe we can put that in the description.
Okay.
Because we had some family visiting recently, and I suggested we refill our water bottles at this cute little fountain, and our family was really concerned that the water wasn't drinkable. But I was explaining that if there's a fountain and it has this little, what you call it? It's a little like spigot, essentially.
It's basically like a metal pipe, a metal spigot. Yeah.
And it
non-ornamental, to clarify.
Yes. It will look different than the rest of the fountain. It's like a little metal pipe that is at about the height that you could refill a water bottle or put your face up to it to get some water. Once you see one, you'll start noticing them around.
It's a good giveaway too if there's so they're kind of L-shaped, and they'll come out and they'll go down, and it'll just be water gushing down. And most of them have a little hole, a little opening at the top of it, because if you plug up the where the water comes out, water shoots out of that little hole. And the idea is if you don't have a water bottle, you can plug up the bigger hole, and then water comes out of the smaller hole into the air, so you can just treat it as like a water fountain, like at school or something. I don't know where people have water fountains anymore.
So those are different from the fountains that you should not be in. If you see a fountain like the Trevi Fountain, and you're like, wow, I could take a dip there and swim in it like it's a pool, chances are you should not be in it.
Well, actually, on those notes, it's also just not safe because Trevi, I think the one in Piazza Navona, and the one at the steps of the Spanish Steps are all chlorinated, and they're all like treated, so they're not safe for drinking. That being said, at the Spanish Steps, on either end of the fountain, there's this little spot where you can get water, and there's usually a really long line of people getting water. And this is just to say, like, if you're thirsty and you see a fountain somewhere, 98% chance it's drinkable. The ones that are not drinkable, almost across the board, will have a little plaque that says "Acqua non potabile," like, and usually like water non-potable underneath it. And it's just, but that's all to say, all water, typically speaking, in Rome is drinkable. It's part of their whole thing. Free water for everybody all the time that's consumable. But the reason I mention it is because Trevi Fountain is a big no-no to go into. All the fountains are. Like, don't go into the fountains. You will get fined, and then they will put a little ban on you. Like, they'll ban you for 30 days from that area. And if they see you, and I mean, obviously they can't uphold it because they're not going to track you down. But the idea is if they see you again and catch you again, they can give you a much stronger fine. So it's just best to not go. I mean, enjoy the fountains, be near the fountains. You can even dip a finger in the fountain. But there's always cops, by the way, like sitting there and whistling. So it's not like,
at the Trevi Fountain.
At the Trevi Fountain specifically. Yeah. And in the Spanish Steps, like, actually, now that we're on the Spanish Steps.
Yeah, right now you cannot sit on the Spanish Steps. It's something that started during COVID. I think it's to prevent crowding so that there's not a spread of COVID, but it's still going on. So you can't sit on the Spanish Steps. The cops will whistle at you. You're not going to get fined. They'll just be grumpy with you.
Which I kind of like it though, because we came like 2015 or 2016, and it was just, you couldn't get down or up the stairs because everybody was, and the cops kept having a whistle to tell people to make a path. And we've been places though, like even at Chatura we went, and which is a little town, it doesn't really matter, but there's a staircase there, and people had to go up and down these stairs, like people working at this event, and everyone was sitting at the steps, and eventually people were just kind of climbing over people sitting, and the people sitting are getting angry, but it's like you didn't leave any space, you didn't leave a path, an opening. And I think it was the same thing with the Spanish Steps. It's like you're annoyed people are elbowing you in the back of the head, but we can't get down the stairs. So now they don't let anybody sit. However, still a very lovely spot if you want to see classic Rome.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's supposed to be a spot everyone's supposed to go see. What's next in this list?
Let's talk about ATAC cards, ATAC cards.
Well, Darcy, what are ATAC cards?
Nathaniel, ATAC cards are the cards that you get to ride the subway and the bus. So that can mean just like the one little ticket that you get for a 100-minute ride, the regular €1.50 card, or the weekly cards, monthly cards, anything that you're using to ride the public transportation, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So they can get you maybe farther than you would think. Nathaniel, do you want to talk about where they can get you?
I would love to. We're very excited about this because it's new information to us. We've been coming here for years and just learned. Very briefly, though, to describe the cards, Darcy mentioned 100-minute. Each town, each city that has a metro kind of has their own formula, right? Like some are, I know that you put minutes on a card, or you put money on a card, or they bring you a certain distance. I think London's is a certain distance. In Rome, it's minute. You want for €1.50. You buy a card. It's good for 100 minutes from when you stamp the card, whether at the turnstile or every bus has a little machine that stamps the ticket. And that's good for 100 minutes, which means if you need to go to the Piazza Del Popolo, if you want to go to the Colosseum, if you want to go here, you want to go there, you can keep using that card for 100 minutes and then, it expires and you have to use a new one. So it can be very useful if you need to kind of go do little errands or something like that.
And on that note, this is something that I was concerned about when we first did this. That includes the metro system and buses. Mm-hmm. So I can take the metro a few stops, get off, and then change to a bus, stamp the ticket, and that's in the same 100 minutes. That's not a different journey.
And the same thing with the tram as well, in case, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So all that is the same, like depending on where you're going to be staying, your hotel, your Airbnb, you might have to switch transportation. We have to switch from the either the metro to the tram or with the bus, sometimes bus to the tram. And you just take your card, you go and you restamp it. And you don't even have to restamp it necessarily, but it's nice, it's good to do. And all this is because, as we experienced today, actually, there are people, ATAC, like the Transportation Authority, workers will get on and check for everybody that has a ticket, because it's a bit of a, like at least the Rome buses, and a lot of Europe, but specifically Rome, you can get on it anywhere in the bus. You don't have to get on the front of the bus. So you can get on anywhere in the bus, and then as long as you just go stamp your ticket, you're good. You can, stay on the bus. But it's a bit of an honor system sort of idea. And I think we've talked about that before. So people do come around and they ask you, hey, can I see your ticket? Yep, that's valid. Or, hey, it's not valid. Here's an immediate fine. But these tickets, as we learned, can actually bring you a little bit further than we thought, or a little bit farther than we thought. And a little bit of both. And specifically Ostia. And Ostia is the beach, basically, in Rome. Funny enough, if you do come to Rome, you're probably coming to Fiumicino, which is the main airport, FCO, Leonardo da Vinci Fiumicino Airport. And that Fiumicino is right on the water, just literally across the Tiber, north of Ostia. And Ostia is famous for Ostia Antica, which is old Ostia, which is a sort of like the old port. It's all ruins. It's a bit like Pompeii, which is, in the sense of it's ruins, there's not actually anything there, no buildings, but the ruins of buildings. And of course, there's also the beach. And as we found out recently, that Metro card, the ATAC card, the 100-minute card, or your daily, weekly, monthly pass, will get you out there. So if you came, and the reason I mentioned the airport, because if you came from the airport, and if you've listened to our other podcasts, you have to pay anywhere between 7 and 15 euros to get from Fiumicino. But Ostia, that's right next to it, you can get to for €1.50. And that little card brings you basically all the way out to the beach, if you guys want to have a beach day while you're here, or if you want to go to Ostia Antica and have a very lovely time in the park, as it's called. It's a Parco Nazionale now. It also brings you, though, to, I believe, Hadrian's Villa in Tivoli. There's a bus system, the Cotral, COTRAL bus system that runs out there and back, and you can use those tickets on board the Cotral buses. So these tickets aren't, right? They're a lot more useful, honestly, than we thought, because, obviously they're incredibly useful to getting around Rome. But when we were looking to go into the beach, we were trying to figure out, we've never gone to the beach in Rome before, so we were trying to figure out how do we do this, and we just use the normal cards.
Can they get you to Bracciano?
They can't.
Okay.
Bracciano is a town that is just a bit north, about 40 minutes north of Rome, on the Lake Bracciano, and it's a really popular. It's a really popular town for Romans to go to, because it's basically it's a little more upscale, refined than going to Ostia, but it's a lake water instead of seawater. Some people, I love the lake, or I love the sea. But it's not that expensive. It's quite a nice little. It's a tiny little old town right on the lake, and it's about 40 minutes on a train, and it's like a regional train. And Darcy and I went recently, and you just go to the train station and buy your ticket. It's not Termini though, and not Tiburtina, I don't believe. That leaves from Roma Ostienza, and I will put that in description for the heck of it. But Roma Ostienza is sort of like Rome's more regional, like train kind of center. Like if it's sort of like New York City and the Long Island Railroad, for those of you who are from New York and know what I'm talking about, it's a sort of like that's the system that Ostienza is. It's not necessarily more regional, international, or even interregional than that. So no, Bracciano is a different ticket,
Okay.
but that's like
yeah.
€3 anyway, €2.
An ATAC card really can get you to a lot of places, I feel like, even if it's not Bracciano.
And if you're here for a week and you have the week-long pass, definitely make use of it. Get around as much as you can.
We also haven't mentioned that the ATAC card, or riding the subway, bus, whatever you're riding, kids under 10 ride free. Like I said, our family was visiting recently, and one of our family members is 6, so she just had to scoot through, the turnstiles or the newer, some of the newer systems. It's not a turnstile; it's just like a little
Door
or automatic door that opens. So she had to scoot through with one of us. Perfectly legal. It's what she's supposed to do. That's the system. But kids under 10 are free.
And on that note, very quickly, speaking of the people who today were checking for tickets, there was this a one girl that the family was claiming that she was 9, despite the fact that she didn't
Maybe
look
she's 9. Who knows?
Yeah, it's and I think it was the point, who really, guys, do you really care this much? But they wanted to see her identification, and of course the grandmother was like, she's 9, she doesn't have identification, what are you talking about? So I'm saying this just because if any of you are like my dad, who was trying to make me pass off as a 9-year-old when I was 12 and get me free rides on the what is it, the little inner tube when you go down the river. Tubing? Is it just called tubing? I think it was called tubing. Anyway, he tried to give me free rides in this tube when I was 12, and he's like, he's 9. I'm like, I'm not 9. And the guy was like, oh, you're not 9? Anyway, this is all a really complicated way of saying potentially be honest and avoid a fight with the transportation authority. But on the topic of kids, we realized we never talked about what to do with kids in Rome.
Mm-hmm. And there's not that much to do, to be honest. I mean, it's not a place that's set up for kids to have fun. That being said, there are tons of kids here who look like they're having a great time. It's just that they're going to do the same things that adults do. There's not specific kids parks unless you go outside of the city to whatever it is, like Funland, Water Park Funland or something. I don't know what it is. They're going to be just seeing the sights with the grown-ups. But there is kind of one fun thing. If you go, I think it's at the Coliseum, kids can take a class on how to fight like a Roman or something.
Gladiator, I think.
A gladiator, yeah, it's quite cute. But aside from that, there's not a kids art museum or, anything like that.
There is a kids museum technically near the Piazza Del Popolo. Just north of it, it's a little small thing. It's air conditioned, which is very lovely. And in the Villa Borghese, though, there is also a petting zoo, playground area, and you pay money to get in. And it's again designed for kids. But I guess we also if you've been to Edinburgh in Scotland, the museums there all have this really elaborate, beautiful kids section. It's very tactile. There's a lot of touching and this and that, and figuring out how things work. Rome's museums typically are not like that. They're a lot more of sitting and watching things,
looking at old things.
Yeah. And then we've unfortunately found, of course, when you walk around the 6-year-old, you are going to every playground in a 5-mile radius, and we found out that none of them are very fun. They're all sort of really poorly designed.
Yeah, Rome doesn't do well on its playground game.
No, it's right in the sun, no shade. It's kind of a really weird. A lot of them are just why would you build a playground here? This is a horrible area.
Yes, you are right, for sure. And I think a lot of them have a lot of activity in the evenings when the sun's going down. A lot of them are near sort of like, this sounds terrible. It's not something that flies in the US, I feel like. They're near bars. Yeah. So like adults will hang out and have a beer responsibly, and kids can go play on the playground, hopefully supervised by their parents. So if it's in the evening, I think that's a great place to take your kids. But they're not the best.
No, but this isn't to say don't come to Rome with your kids. It's very much, I think they will have a blast. Most kids that we see here are having a blast. It's, food and gelato alone, it's sort of like, that's it. It's more specifically, there might not be a lot of kid-specific things happening.
Yeah.
But next, though, we kind of wanted to tie it in somehow with kids was staying hydrated.
Yeah. Again, having our 6-year-old cousin here really illuminated us to the fact that obviously we have more stamina. We have longer legs. She's quite tall, but we have longer legs. We can go for longer without having water. So it's important, obviously, for all adults to stay hydrated and be really aware of how tired you are, how you're feeling. And if you have kids, you know this, you just got to check in with them, because if you're coming in the summer, it's hot and you're going to be walking more than you expect. So they're just going to be worn out and thirsty.
Yeah. Staying hydrated, again, keep circling back to that, sort of always important, finding the fountains, bottles of water. If you stop sweating, that is a terrible sign, you've become dehydrated. We've actually started, I don't know if you guys have like electrolyte tablets or little packages of electrolyte sort of powder. We've started, we got some from Decathlon, which is like a sport retailer place, like a big one in Europe. But we started like bringing out these electrolyte tablets with us, because it's sort of, with all the sweating that's happening, basically you are crashing quickly. And we've realized that just with a little bit of electrolytes and a little bit of kind of smart planning, we're able to kind of leave the house at 9 and stay out till like 8, rather than having to come back at 1 in the afternoon because we're just dead and can't figure out how do you stay out, basically. Especially because some of these people we see, they must have full days, because they look exhausted, and they just, there's that sort of energy of like, you've been out here since the wee hours of the morning.
Seeing all of the possible old buildings.
Exactly. So staying hydrated, especially when we have kids, just very, very important. And then last-ish, not quite last, but last very important thing, I guess, we wanted to kind of very quickly talk about behavior. Behavior also in the sense of potentially your behavior, and as well as the behavior of Italians.
Yeah, like cultural differences in behaviors. I think we wanted to talk about this specifically because we went to a very cool thing the other day. We went to a rally car race near the Coliseum, and it was set up in a way that we were all really squished together as spectators of this race, and just on top of outdoor tables at a few different restaurants. We were all smushed together, and a couple of people had small little handbags with them. One person had hers out sort of just on the table, like a normal thing to do. Another woman had hers in a chair next to her, which seemed like a safe place to put it. But a waiter came and it seemed like to all of us around, aggressively was, kind of shouting at these people about having their handbags in view, essentially. But he was speaking Spanish and Italian, and none of us around, spoke well enough to understand. Another waiter came by and explained, he's really worried that someone's going to steal your bags. Just hold on to them. We know that there is essentially a purse snatcher around this area. It's just happened. And there's just this Italian thing of talking in a way that I think they think is loving and clear, but comes across super aggressive. Now that your mom's Italian, she does it. All of the Italians that we know do it. And it's just a cultural difference. So if someone is what you perceive to be yelling at you and you don't know why, they might actually be trying to help you.
There's that, I always think of that scene, I don't know if you've ever seen like Mission Impossible 2. I think it's Mission Impossible 2. Anyway, it's with like, basically they're trying to get Tom Cruise into the Vatican over the back wall, and they pretend like the truck is, basically the engine's gone, something's wrong with the engine in the truck, so they're all stopping, and it's all this long line of Italians behind them, like yelling, and they're yelling back, and it's just like nightmare. And then of course they finally fix it, and everyone's like, oh, ciao, 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 no, non te preoccupare, ciao. And there's that very like, you were just screaming at me minutes ago, and now we're supposed to be friendly, but it happens so much here that people will yell at each other, get in arguments, get out of their car, scream at each other, and then leave with like handshakes and fist bump kind of things. And it's just like, what is going on? And I think even in the way that sometimes people just talk to each other normally. And I want, like, part of one of the things I wanted to mention is it's one of those things we wanted to talk about, I think, earlier, and we wanted to kind of get back here before talking about it to make sure it was still the same and it wasn't just COVID. But there's a difference in the way Italians work than in the way Americans work, especially, and I say that because it's like 70% of listeners on this podcast I think are American. So if you're not American, you better learn how America works. But no, as I worked in a grocery store for about 2 or 3 years, between like the deli and the front counter, and like, in the shelves, sort of helping people find stuff and things like that. And there's very much a sense of like, customer comes first. The customer's always right, but it's always like, do everything for the customer possible. Be very kind, considerate to the customer. If they're, if they're checking out with you, basically, you're talking to them, asking about how their day, they found everything okay, this, that, the other thing. And you're not talking to anybody you work with, right? That's like not a thing. Those people are dead to you practically. It's a different for me because I come here and I go grocery store shopping, and they sort of pretend I don't exist, which is a fun little change. I'm like, oh, or there's a curtness, right? There's like, I'm their friend, and it's like, hey, what? Do you want a bag? No? Okay, yeah, it's like $7.48. Fine, card, fine, yeah. Tap your card here, right here, thank you, yeah, fine, all right, bye. Next, and it's very like, they're already annoyed with you for being there, so don't do anything else kind of thing, but it's not, at the same time, I've noticed like asking them a question, or, even sort of just making a joke or something like that, it's all of a sudden there's sort of that, they're very warm all of a sudden. Whoever's working the counter is a very warm person, and they're happy to help. They're like, oh yeah, no, let me help you find that thing. It's just, there's that initial sort of, that, I don't know what it is, but it's that moment, right, of like, I don't really want to be here. Yeah. I think is a good way to describe it. It's like, I think we talked about that at a pizza place, Sorbillo, in Naples. It was like, yes. They come to your table, they take your menu, and as they're walking away, like, you're shouting to them what you want, and it's chaotic. And you're like, what? Come over here for like 10 seconds and just let me tell you my order. But it's like they don't. And sometimes if they've gotten away before, we can tell them we want a beer or we want this or that. And it's just like, whoa. When you come back, we have other stuff to order.
So not customer focused.
Yeah.
Yeah, but nice. People are super nice, which is something sometimes I have to keep in mind because they can come off as if they don't care about you as another human being, or like you don't exist. But, it's just the barrier. It's just the cultural work barrier, I think is what it is.
And that's just something we want to mention because we have seen people in line, mostly American, some other non-Americans but they're, they're kind of, they get a little short or snippy, and they're very like, hey, hey, what are you doing? Like, I need your help. I need you to focus. And it's like, well, they're not here for you. They're here because their boss wants to make money at a grocery store, but didn't want to work the front counter. So he hired somebody else. And really, they're just there to ring things up and take your money. They don't care if you leave because it doesn't come out of their paycheck. And it's not very Italian to fire somebody for having a bad attitude. And that's just something we've found. And it's not necessarily like it's a generalization. So it's not like in every single instance. You will almost certainly have, run into some very nice people, especially at restaurants, because that's just a difference of being in a touristy city versus Naples.
We have a few regular cafes we go to, and there's one that, we frequented, and I just had the impression that the two people who worked behind the bar were just grumpy, and like specifically with me. Not specifically with me, but the people around me and also me. And I ended up just kind of chatting with one of the people behind the bar the other day, and now we're just kind of like, happy little friends. But it's just that especially in Rome, I think people are so used to dealing with obnoxious tourists or obnoxious locals who are just trying to get in and out. And so they're not putting on a happy face for anybody else's benefit, but they're still human. So, you just got to keep that in mind. I have to keep that in mind.
We also, it's funny, like on that note, we have a friend in the South and a friend.
Italy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, in the south of Italy. And it's a friend, he's a friend now. And before though, we actually, we were looking for apartments and we ended up staying as like one of his apartments sort of for a few months, I think like 2 months. And we could never figure out like we just, this guy doesn't like us. And like, we're pretty quiet. Like, we're not loud. Yes, sometimes a bottle, like you stack up the bottles near the door to take them downstairs. And yes, sometimes they would fall. And
to clarify, this man owns apartments and we were renting one of his apartments. We weren't living with him in his apartment.
Sorry, to clarify that. Yeah, we were living above him. And it was just kind of one of those like really interesting things. We could not figure out like, why doesn't he like us? Like, I mean, not that everyone has to like us, but I love when there's a reason. I'm like, it's just because we're American. And he's actually also a friend of my mom's. So we're talking one day. She's like, oh, no. He likes you. Thinks you guys are great. I'm like, clearly he does not. He like runs away from conversation. And she explained, because she's been in this country longer than we have, that a lot of people, especially out of bigger cities, there's a sense of maybe embarrassment, but also if they can't communicate with you, there's a sense of, I should be able to communicate with you and I can't, so I feel bad and I don't know what to do. And so everyone kind of clams up or can feel a little cold. And we've noticed that even just, sometimes you're just stumbling through a conversation that you're not sure either of you are getting the full picture, but it's like, so all that is to say essentially that there are many reasons for why somebody might be kind of cold or distant or acting like they don't like you. And most of them probably have nothing to do with you. It's just the fact that they are, especially in Rome. You're living in a city that millions of people come to every year to visit and treat you as if you are like, a worker at like an amusement park, when in fact you're just somebody who needed a job at a cafe and you're not really sure why all of a sudden somebody's yelling at you because you didn't drop off their coffee and you're like, that's not you. What do you mean? Like, you come get your coffee, it's ready. So just we wanted to prepare everyone, because it is, I don't know, important to come prepared maybe.
Yeah, and just to realize that people aren't customer service forward.
Yeah.
But they're nice behind that.
Yeah, exactly. And in spite of that, they're very nice. And I think last is
just some updates that we have since we've been back.
Yeah. Just and some of these updates are sort of post. Again, I keep saying post COVID, and I it's a bit tongue in cheek because like you still need. And we'll get into this specifically in a minute, but you still need your mask like on public transportation, and then like the cases are still on the rise in some places, but by and large,
functioning in a world where a lot of people are moving on.
The first thing is actually the price of gelato has gone up. And I mentioned this because I was so adamant in that gelato episode about like, don't ever pay more than $2 or $2.50 for a gelato. But a number of our favorite places, including Neve di Latte, have actually gone up in price to €3 for a small gelato. And this is mainly because just everything's gotten a little expensive. Gas has gone up in price, driving gasoline, there we go. Has gone up in price, so like transportation's gotten more expensive, and therefore everything's gotten more expensive, like anywhere else. But I mentioned that specifically because I realized that was something I was very adamant about. But in general, grocery store prices have gone up a little bit. Like chips that used to be 80 cents are now €1.20. Or like a lot of vegetables have kind of gone up in price a little bit. So that's, this is what it is. This is July of 2022. Mm-hmm. And as it changes, like if we notice it changing we'll probably just interject with podcasters saying, hey, like things have gone back down. So if you're, because it's always cheaper to go in the off season anyway, like September, October, even November to Rome isn't bad. We've heard it's really a beautiful place to be in November. And so things will naturally be cheaper there anyway, as far as lodging and things. But at the same time, other expenses will be more. So besides gelato.
Yeah, besides gelato, another thing that has changed in line with things being more expensive is that a lot of stores don't have AC. Fewer stores than before have AC, just because it's expensive.
There's a with the war in Ukraine, gas, specifically the sort of gas that Italy uses to sort of produce electricity, has gotten more expensive. And while they've tried to shore up their sort of consumption, like basically like instead of getting supplied from Russia, now they're getting supplied from Algeria. So it's in an attempt to kind of hopefully normalize prices. But one of the big things they've asked people, like they being the government asked of sort of citizens and businesses, is to cut back on AC usage, both inside the homes, but inside of stores, because, you're cooling down this massive store for 7 people. So they were sort of like, can you guys cut that out? So if it seems that, some of these places are really hot, it's unfortunately for your comfort level and our comfort level by design. But the idea is it helps kind of alleviate the burden on people who also need the gas as energy production. And that's a whole, like, for anybody who is coming in 2022, there is a bit of a whole political thing happening. Like, I mean, the government just sort of in shambles right now.
Yeah, government, is in shambles currently.
So it's a great time to come, real nice time to come. But also on that note is you might notice certain lodging will be more expensive for 2 reasons. One, after COVID, people really want to make their money back. So a lot of Italians even have been like apoplectic at the price of lodging, because they would go down to they go down south to the beaches, or they'd go to the countryside, and now they're seeing that like what used to be $800 for the month is now closer to $15, and they're like, well, what's changed? And essentially the people who own the house just really want to make that money back. So things have gotten, in that sense, significantly more expensive. But also some like Airbnbs and stuff have started asking their tenants, I guess their lodgers, to pay for things like utilities, because Italy's kind of one of those countries where, famously speaking, rent is very low, but utilities are very high. It's like rent is $300 a month, but utilities can also be about $300 a month. So, which for us is a lot. I mean, we were in the States, we were never paid more than $100 a month for like electricity and water and trash stuff. Yeah. So, so that's just something. So the prices have a little bit increased, something to factor into your budget. It's not like, it's not you not budgeting, it's Italy being just more expensive naturally.
Yeah, and our last update is that you still have to wear masks on buses, because while a lot of the world is moving on, hopefully everybody is still trying to be as safe as possible. So you don't have to currently, right now, in July 2022, we don't have to wear masks outside, but you do have to wear a mask when you're on a bus. Until the end of
September, I believe.
That's I think that's the last I've heard. And it'll update, obviously.
Yeah, and if it changes, we'll update it. And it's unfortunate, like my brother is going to come and visit, and he's curious about all things COVID. So he's wanting to know like what changes and what isn't going to change. And he wants to know like what's the soonest I'll know about an update. And as explained to him, and I'll explain it to you, is that Italy doesn't sort of like, we thought there would be no more mask rules because July 1st, was it July 1st or was it June 1st? It was either June or July 1st that they were going to drop everything, because they had already dropped the green pass, the reinforced green pass. They dropped all the quarantine rule, everything. Like May 30th, I think, was the last day. And some things were going to stay in place and the rest was going to be totally dropped. And then we hear that day that I think it was, June 1st, that, oh no, you now need masks on all forms of transportation that is not a car. So buses, trains, trams.
All public transportation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also in between cities as well.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So sorry, public, but like even if it's a privately run train company, you still need a mask on the privately run train company. And yeah, so in your car, you're fine. But basically everywhere else, on your scooter, you're fine as well. But everywhere else, you will need to wear a mask. The FFP2 or an N95 mask is what they're requiring until the end of September. And unfortunately, we won't know anything past that. But that's kind of the last COVID requirement that exists, unless you're going to a hospital or a nursing home, in which case you are still required to wear masks inside as well. But besides that, I think that's everything. That's like all of our updates, all of our new information.
Yeah, that's the kitchen sink.
That's the kitchen sink, man. That's all. We still have a new website, onlyabag.com.
And we're not stopping the podcast. This is just Rome.
Yeah, this is just the end of potentially the end of the Rome quote unquote series. There's so much more we want to talk about, like specifically one bag and sort of ethically traveling and long term traveling, like how to go for more than 3 months. But we figured that this is a good stopping place for Rome for now. Like we'd like to at some point, if we learn more new things, to continue it. But I think that gives everybody like a really fun, I don't know, hopefully also like interesting and important information to know before arriving, because I don't know, it's a good springboard, it's a good jumping off point, I think.
Hopefully we didn't sound too dour about Rome.
Yeah.
I feel like we've been warning you guys about things. You're going to have fun. It's going to be great.
I think what's funny, like the first time we came to, I remember like, I think after we left, I was like, yeah, it'd be really, maybe fun to, go back or something like that. And Darcy's like, why? You hated it? And I was like, I didn't hate it. I thought it was great. And she's like, you did not stop complaining the whole time. And I was like, oh my God, that's true. So I realized there's oftentimes I will not say the thing, this is me personally, I will not say the things that I enjoyed about a place. Like, as if that's the default. Of course I enjoyed Rome. There were just a few weird parts of it. And I realized I don't say those things out loud. So yes, you will absolutely be enjoying, every time we come here, we like it more, even though as Romans have told us many times over that, why are you coming in the summer? It's the worst time of year to come. Yeah. And they just mean because it's hot. They're just like, oh, it's hot. Why would you come in the summer? I'm like, because it's hot everywhere. It's summer. I'd rather be in Rome.
Also, full disclosure, we've been lucky enough to have a house sit
yes.
in Rome in the summertime.
The last 3 years.
So that's why we're here.
Yeah, no, we would, oh my God, no. We would, house sits are fantastic, basically. So we're coming for that. But we wouldn't probably come otherwise because...
in the summertime.
In the summertime, yeah. Because, we haven't been to Florence either. We haven't been to a lot of places, and like summer is a really easy travel time. There's a lot of discounts on like trains and stuff, and we'll get into that later because that's not Rome specific. So if you are curious about like, even just trains to get around or buses to get around and how to do that, that's the kind of stuff we want to get into. So please stay tuned. Again, all of this as kind of will be updated on the website. We're going to do like a little like kind of a restaurant recommendation type and like a Italian cuisine explained. There's some sort of different subgroups on the website we're trying to start because, just in case you're curious about things like Chinotto, which is the sort of Italian soda, or in case you do want a recommendation for a restaurant, we want to give a little explanation of where it is, why you should go there, and the prices you are, should be expecting to pay, as well as sort of those classic lists, roundup lists of, what we bring with us when we go out for the day kind of stuff. But all the information will be there. And we hope you enjoy this podcast episode. We haven't decided on a name besides the kitchen sink episode, but updates and more. I'm not really sure. There's nothing catchy really besides that kitchen sink episode.
But hopefully it was some good information for y'all.
And bringing in that southern.
And we hope you have fun.
Yeah, we hope you enjoy your time in Rome. We hope you... Either it's the start of the end of your trip. We hope it's a lovely, I wouldn't say a hopefully lovely start of your trip, or I'm like, well, it could be a lovely end of your trip. Could be just the trip itself. It's like, there's so many people that come to Italy and go to more than just Rome. So I hope you enjoy your time in Rome. And until next time, thank you guys so much for listening. Darcy's not going to say anything because she doesn't like you as much as I do.
No. Sometimes Nathaniel takes long pauses and I'll interject and he was like, that was a pause for dramatic effect. So sorry everyone, I thought that was a dramatic pause. What am
All
I
my
saying
pauses
now?
are dramatic pauses. I'm a very dramatic person. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. That's what I was saying.